All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Bret Lueder Show, episode number 7, where we continue this wonderful and riveting conversation with Furg Wilson, aka Chief Peace Eagle. Furg, welcome back. I always appreciate your time.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
All
Always
right.
interesting.
So a couple, there's so many ways to go after that last segment, but one area that I wanted to touch on was that of the Olmecs, because there's books out there that say that it was Africans that discovered America, not Columbus, right?
Absolutely.
So in my vast archives, I've got this little gem right here.
Okay.
Frontiers of Science from 1982, volume 4, number 3. There is a wonderful article by a woman named Diana Schoenberg right there, Black Explorers in America.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read to you just a quick passage and then ask you how the Olmecs and that civilization played into the Mississippian Empire and what was their relationship. Okay, so this is a quote from a Malinese, a sultan supposedly from Mali, who was chronicling a transatlantic voyage in 1311.
Okay.
And this is the quote. The monarch who preceded me would not believe that it was impossible to discover the limits of the neighboring sea. He wished to know. He persisted in his plan. He caused the equipping of 200 ships and filled them with gold, food, and water for 2 years. And he said to the commanders, do not return until you have reached the end of the ocean or when you have exhausted your food and water. They went away and their absence was long. None came back and their absence continued. Then a single ship returned. And then we asked the captain of their adventures and their news. And he replied, Sultan, we sailed a long while until we met with what appeared to be a river with a strong current flowing within the open sea. My ship was last. The others sailed on, but as each of them came to that place, they did not come back, nor did they reappear. And I do not know what became of them. As for me, I turned where I was and did not enter the current. Okay, that's from 1311. Okay, Africans exploring or heading west to explore South America, Central America, the Caribbean, North America. But then you start getting into the Olmecs, and here's a beautiful picture of an Olmec head. I think they were first discovered in La Venta. I think it was in Guatemala.
No, La Venta is in Mexico. La Venta and
Okay,
Tabasco.
okay.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that culture, 1000 BC to 800 BC, 2500 years before Columbus.
Correct.
Did I get that about right?
You got it about right. Yes.
Okay. Is that part of the Mississippian Empire?
Absolutely. It's part of the Mississippian Empire.
Fill us in. This is fascinating.
Okay. So that's interesting that you read that passage from the book from the accounts from Mali, because 2 great Malian kings, Abu Bakari and Mansa Musa, chronicled their voyage. Mansa Musa was the richest man on the planet, and he set out with over 300 ships, a lot of gold, and set out and never returned home. Abu Bakari the same way. He was a rich ruler for Mali, both of them. And if you track the wind currents and the ocean currents, where they take you directly through the Caribbean, directly to Central America, and you land on the shores of Guatemala or Mexico.
Okay.
So that passage you just read is a good account of how the ocean currents would take them over here. But also, if you look at some of the ancient writings and you look at the pictures, you would see that the civilization that was here, Olmec civilization was here when the Africans came over. So they never returned. So what did they do? They mixed with the people that were here. You know,
so that you're psychic, all right?
Right.
You've got some psychic stuff going on, because that's my question.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first question. Were the Olmecs already here?
The Olmecs were already here, but the Africans came here and they also intermixed with them.
Okay, so the Olmecs didn't come from Africa at an earlier time. They were already indigenous.
They traded with the Africans that were coming here. That was just an account, a recorded account, but they were coming here before then. The Africans.
Okay.
Right. because they're
Oh,
finding African artifacts in Central America that can only come from Mali and from Africa. Spear tips, headdresses, garbs, pottery, the same things. So that right there tells me that yes, the Africans did come here, but the people, we were here already also.
so what does that say about global migrations, or what does that say about a prior civilization where, and today most people would think, and maybe myself included to some extent, would think, well, Central America and South America, those are Latino peoples. But
Right.
in a time in the past,
Mm-hmm.
apparently it was a mixed culture.
Well, when you say Central America and South America, they're Latino people because of Balboa, Cortez, and De Soto. Those are Latin, comes from Europe. Spain, the Spanish conquistadors came over and intermixed with the people and created another group of people, which you call Mexicans, Spanish-speaking people. But the indigenous people are still there. They're on the Gulf Coast, they're on the Pacific Coast. If you go to some of them small villages on the Pacific Coast, especially up in the mountains, down in Oaxaca or down in Tabasco, you'll see the indigenous Aboriginal people, copper-colored people, just as dark as I am down there.
Okay.
And even a celebration that they just had down in Mexico, Cinco de Mayo, that's the celebration of defeating the French. But it's also, if you dig into it, it's the copper-colored people, the indigenous people that teamed up with the Mexican Latino people to defeat the French. And that was in remembrance for the help that they got from the copper-colored people to run the French out of Mexico.
Wow. Just it's the things have not really changed very much, right? The cultures
Nope.
are still battling each other. Doesn't matter how far you go back.
Right.
Okay, so were there Olmec populations in North America as part of the Mississippian Empire, or were they just more a southerly branch of the empire? How far
Well,
south did the Mississippian Empire go? Let's say that.
Mississippian Empire went all the way to the east coast of Texas and in the south border of what we call Texas.
Okay.
So here's how the migration happened. So the Olmecs kept moving for some reason. I was reading their history. They started out in La Venta, and then they moved up further north to Tehuanacan, and that area right there where the pyramids are at. And then in the history books, they said that they just vanished, but they didn't vanish. They were migrating people. So they came up through Mexico into Texas and circled around from Texas and went into Louisiana and created a civilization there called Poverty Point.
Okay.
Poverty Point is an older civilization than the Egyptian pyramids. So they had mounds there. They got a serpent mound there.
Right.
And they had a civilization there. And from there, some of them went west up to California, up the Pacific coast. And the majority of them went east to Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, and created the Mississippian Empire.
Okay, so Mississippian Empire is an offshoot of Olmec culture, migrating Olmec culture.
Yes, it is Olmec culture.
Very interesting. Okay.
And they're finding, and if you research it, you're finding the Olmec, the Toltec, and the Mayan, and the Aztec artifacts. They're finding it in Georgia and Alabama. They're digging it up, and as quick as they're digging it up, they're getting it to the Smithsonian in the basement.
Yeah, where they cover it up like all the giant skeletons.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah, wonderful. And then now we circle back to the cabal, right? And that's
Right.
the whole. It's just amazing to me how getting into alternative ancient history leads to all the different issues that have led to our present situation. It's just fascinating to me. So, so you've got the Olmecs that are in United States, southern United States. Well, just speculating, what do you think that slaves that were brought over to the southern states, could they tell a difference between an Olmec descended person? Did they recognize? I mean, there's descendants in the southern states of Olmecs and, let's say, runaway slaves or slave descendants.
So when they started slavery in America, and bringing over the 300,000 or 200,000 Africans shackled, we were here the whole time.
Right.
So which people do you think would benefit you and know the land, growing your crops, your tobacco and your cotton and everything? Would it be the indigenous people that's growing the stuff already? Or would it be the Africans coming off the slave ship?
Well, yeah, you're gonna always, yeah, adhere to the indigenous people. They're the ones that have done
Right.
that, been there and done that. Yeah.
And then if you take people, the Taino people, the Arawak people from the Caribbean islands, from Barbados, the Bahamas, Trinidad, Tobago, Cuba, Puerto Rico, if you take those people and put them on a schooner and take the schooner up the East Coast to New York and sold them on the block and said they came from Africa, you think anybody's going to know the difference?
Right.
And then if you take, and then during the red stick, the white stick wars with the British and the Americans, and the various Indian tribes that would conquer the other ones and work together with the colonials, you enslave those people, you keep the women, you breed them, you breed with the women, and you take the men and put them on that same schooner and send them down to the Caribbean to work on the sugar plantations and stuff and everything, and said they came from Africa. You think they would know the difference? No. So a lot of the slave trade consisted of taking the prisoners of war from America down to the Caribbean, bringing the warriors from the Caribbean up to America, saying that they were slaves from Africa, and making sure that nobody knew where they come from, based on my studies. You had a small amount of Africans that came over from Africa, but like I said, that's good slave labor because they had good backbones and they were very strong and everything. But you need a lot of people that understood this land, that was connected to this land, that understood the climate of this land to make crops grow.
So, another African originated prophet, Marcus Garvey, said, "A tree without the knowledge of its roots cannot stand."
Absolutely.
So you wipe out the identity of who somebody was, take them to a new place, and it's an ages old conditioning formula.
Absolutely.
For slavery. So before we get into the Egyptians, because I know the Egyptians have a hold here in North America as well, where do you think the Olmecs originated from?
The origination of the Olmecs, I would say, would be from here. The Olmecs were here. And based on my studies and my reading and reading some ancient texts, Sumerian texts, and also reading the book, the Green Emerald Tablet from Thoth, right?
Hermes, yes.
Yeah. The continents were together. The continents separated at one point in time. And when they separated, there was people on these continents, So when the continents separated, you had people in North America, Central America, and South America already when the continents separated. And when they were separated, like I said, the Africans started coming to Central America, to Mexico and stuff, and they were trading with them. Even Chinese. I got a book sitting right here that said the Chinese was over here, and then the Chinese, they drew a map of the world, and right here down in Mexico, they got the Olmecs written on the map.
Wow.
Yes. And they were trading. The Chinese were trading over here also. So I'm saying that the Olmecs were here, the Africans came, the Chinese came, and now you see the mixed people from Africa, Chinese, and from America here.
Absolutely fascinating. So I'm in Northern California, up by Chico, and out in the floodplains of the Sacramento River, in a farmer's field, they found an 800-year-old Chinese junk that was buried in the silt.
There you go.
Yeah, so there you go. So they were exploring on the West Coast as well,
right?
Coming up the Sacramento River at least 800 years ago.
Right.
Absolutely fascinating. So you're speaking of the big continent, Gondwana land or Pangea.
Pangea.
You can see easily on the map how South America fits right into the west coast of Africa.
Yes, it does.
I mean, puzzle piece wise, it looks like a perfect fit, or close enough, right?
Right.
Okay, so we're in America. There's multiple advanced cultures going on, depending how you describe advanced culture. Obviously, they didn't have automobiles, right? But they still had advanced things. Maybe they didn't have the wheel, maybe they did, I don't know, but they had fire, they had They had tool making. Clearly, the Olmec heads are of a high technology of working with stone.
Yes.
So this goes back to, okay, so before we touch on Tartaria, because that's where I was just heading, Egypt, which is also another African culture, African nation now today, but
Right.
culture, ancient culture. I just sent you a post on Facebook. They found a Sphinx from 1912. They discovered it that I don't think they actually dated properly.
Right.
In Cairo, Illinois, which is southern Illinois by the confluence of the rivers there.
Yes.
They found a cave with a bunch of Egyptian artifacts.
Right.
And also in the Grand Canyon in the 1920s or 30s, it was discovered a cave filled with Egyptian artifacts. How do the Egyptians play into this?
Well, I think it's back to the Pangea theory. I believe that when the continents were together, you know, there, like I said, there was people here and civilizations here, you know, and Cairo, Illinois, that's right on the border with Kentucky. We used to drive through there going down to Tennessee and Mississippi all the time. You're going to find Egyptian or African artifacts down there because, like I said, the continents were together. The people were traveling. And even when the continents weren't together, Africans were coming to America. You know, Egyptians probably were coming to America. And they did that. I remember they did that one voyage on that boat that they built through National Geographic in the 70s. Do you remember they built it? Yeah, the Kon-Tiki, right.
Sure, Thor Heyerdahl, yeah.
Exactly, right. I seen that when I was a boy. That was fascinating.
Me too.
They traced that current, and sure enough, it came to America, you know?
So just speculation, did the continents separate relatively quickly? Because it gives me the impression that there was a memory of the time when the continents were together. Therefore, those cultures, let's say in Africa, knew that there was going to be part of the land over here. So they were kind of confident.
Right.
Or, I mean, because if it's thousands and thousands of years apart,
right,
it seems like without telephones or computers, rather, that they're not going to remember after thousands of years.
Right.
But it seems like there was some kind of a memory.
So my thoughts are, when the continents separated, it was such a explosive event. It wasn't a gradual event. It was like a volcanic event. Is this the time when they separated and Pangea popped up between Africa and North America as a bridge, you know, where you could go to Pangea, then you could go ahead and go to Africa and then go to Europe?
Okay.
You know?
So Pangea is a stage after the breakup of
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I may have misspoken there. So, you know, I got the impression that Atlantis was a bridge that was in the Atlantic Ocean,
right,
between Europe and Africa and North and South America.
Right. I heard that one also. And they said, I talked to a lady that said that in her past life, she was an empress from Atlantis. And she said it was up by Ireland and Scotland, up that way. That's where Atlantis was, you know, between the two continents. You know?
So many theories on Atlantis.
Right. So many theories on that. But I do believe there was a landmass between Europe, Africa, and North America that bridged the continents together for a long time, whereas you didn't have to travel as far to get here.
Okay. So speaking of alternative ancient history, this whole idea of an advanced lost civilization, not from thousands of years ago, but maybe only a couple hundred years ago. Is this I'm really new to the Tartaria thing, but even with the little that I've learned about it, I still believe it more than the flat earth.
Yes.
And so Tartaria, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple 200-300 years old, and then much of it's covered by giant mudslides.
Years old. Yeah.
300 to 500. Okay.
Yeah, originated up in Russia, Eurasia, up in that area, trickled down to Africa, Australia, and then came in China, you know, all over there, and then it came over to America.
Okay, in America, with the Atlantic Ocean's already there, but it's crossing the ocean.
Yes, crossing the ocean, right?
Okay.
Because during the Tartarian times, they had vehicles besides ships that could actually fly over here. flying
Okay.
craft,
Okay.
because it's well documented in the Indian culture that they had
You're
the
talking about Vimanas.
Vimanas, and different flying things that could travel. And if you look at this ancient architecture around the world, there's no way that people with horse and buggy and chisels could have made this stuff, even back to the Olmec heads. There's some technology going on there that we don't know about.
Especially when you're talking Olmec heads or you're talking
Right.
Egyptian pyramids.
Yep, the
But
blocks.
then I've watched a couple of videos on Tataria,
Mhm.
and they're talking about Gothic cathedrals
Yes,
in Europe
right.
fitting into that same category, that there wasn't enough manpower, they didn't have the technology, or in America, I think it was the World Exposition, maybe in Chicago,
Yes, in
one of those,
1919.
where
Yep,
they had a building that they said it took X amount of years to build,
right.
but really the labor wasn't there and the
No,
technology wasn't there.
right.
And so, okay, so let's just suppose that this is true, and
Hmm.
it's really fascinating. I'm gonna have to look more into this.
Right.
Where does the Mississippian Empire or pre-Columbian empires fit in with this Tartarian culture? Did they relate to each other? Did they exchange?
No, because this Mississippian culture, the people were basically farmers and hunters and gatherers. This Tartarian culture was something new to them. They seen the structures, but when they seen the structures, something must have happened when they seen the structures, because none of the machineries, the mechanisms, the flying crafts or nothing were around anymore. They seen these abandoned structures. And some of these structures they built their houses on top of. They were mounds, they were covered up. And some of these structures, they just would walk by and would wonder, how did they get here? You know,
So there's a cataclysm that happened of some kind.
of some kind. It was a
Saying
nuclear. I'm hearing it was a nuclear event that just nuked everything. It
3
was
to
a great
500
war.
years ago.
Right.
So I'm thinking there may have been some kind of records kept by some indigenous peoples that maybe could account for something like this. Anything like that you've seen?
Now, unless it's written in a buffalo calf skin or a deer skin or
Okay.
birch bark,
Petroglyph or
probably able to
something.
survive, or petroglyphs in a cave somewhere. But even if you look at the various petroglyphs in the Americas, it's primitive drawings. You know, you don't see no structures like a cathedral or like a shed aquarium or the Museum of Science and Industry or History in Chicago, something with columns. You never see nothing drawn like that in all these petroglyphs or these cave paintings or nothing like that. You don't see
Right.
a car or a flying machine. You see a bird or something like that.
Right.
So something happened. Something happened, whereas this Tartarian civilization was wiped out before the people could really fully understand it and maybe document it.
Okay.
Because if they could and they could associate with it, then we'd have either an oral passed down or written passed down in something that we could put our hands on and say, yes, the Tartarians and the indigenous Mississippian people did interact, and the Tartarians passed information down to these people. But obviously they didn't pass nothing down to these people because they never met those people.
Right. Another thought that occurs to me too is that the survivors write the history or the victors write the history.
Mm-hmm.
If the indigenous peoples, what we call indigenous peoples, survived, maybe they thought all that advanced technology was evil, and so they just kind of ignored it. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, that's a thought too. I just said, you know what? Let's just get back to farming and get back to the basics and don't mess around with that stuff.
Okay. Anything else about Tataria that you can add that's pertinent?
Oh, that's pertinent. Well, Tataria, we know it exists because based on my research, and I've been working together with a couple of people across the country, they're finding, did you hear about the rocks that they're finding that's bleeding? They're
No.
picking up rocks, they're picking up rocks and boulders that are bleeding, still have blood in it from the giants that were here.
I know there's Celtic traditions of
Mhm.
giants that are turned into rock structures.
Rocks. Yeah, exactly.
You see this portrayed in certain movies, like in Hellboy,
Right.
where they're in the Irish landscape, and then the big
Hmm.
giant gets up.
Hmm.
You see this a little bit in the Eternals, the new Disney movie from a couple years ago,
Right.
where the world soul is this
Hmm.
giant being that looks like a series of islands out in the ocean, but
Right.
it's really a being that gets up. That's a fascinating concept right there.
It is definitely.
Um, okay, so
I have friends that are picking up rocks and stuff, and blood's coming out of them, and they used to be fingers and limbs, you know, of gigantic, over 2 meters, 12 foot, 14 foot beings that got fossilized, and they're digging them up. It's just unbelievable. I've seen pictures of them.
so maybe evidence of a nuclear attack somehow.
Pack, right? Exactly.
Okay, like a Sodom and Gomorrah kind of thing. Don't turn
Yeah.
around or
So
you'll become a pillar of salt.
exactly.
Okay, very interesting. Because Sitchin showed that that most likely was some kind of a nuclear attack.
Hmm.
As the Anunnaki, the drama within that family unfolded, and of
Right.
course, us humans are just pawns in their game.
Absolutely.
Um, okay, so we got about 14 minutes left here.
Hmm.
A subject that you and I have broached a couple times, not too deep, but this idea of racism is fascinating to me because if you look at the past, like what you're showing us today and in the first segment,
Hmm.
cultures mixed readily. Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl were supposedly bearded white people, and
Hmm.
you got the Olmecs that are over there. So black and white's mixing. You
Hmm.
don't hear about white fighting black in Central America, let's say.
Hmm.
But you come into modern times, you got slavery going on, but there seems to be this whole kind of a media blitz about black and white and this separation. And it to me, it's wrong to put culture's skin color to the color wheel, especially black and white, because they're opposite ends of the spectrum. So when you call someone black or white, it kind of gives you this subconscious idea that you're totally separated.
Hmm.
When I think that's an illusion, we're all really just one people. It doesn't matter what color our skin are.
Hmm.
But in your research, where did where did the term black to describe people first begin being used? And then by the same token, no pun intended, was the term white person used?
Well, all you have to do is turn to your Bible. Black black is evil, white is angelic. Black
Okay.
magic, black voodoo, you know. And when you look at the Bible and you see the black descriptions in there, and even the dictionaries that they made back then, black, everything to do with black is evil, you know, and everything to do with white is good and pure. Snow is good, black snow is not good, you know.
Or
So
yeah, something burnt is black too. So
burnt is black,
that's not
right?
good.
So basically, from what I've seen, and like I said, during my travels in the military, I lived over in Europe for 10 years. And what was fascinating to me is that every job, when I got out of the military, I stayed as a civilian. I went to school over there and I learned German over there. And when I was over there, the job applications didn't have black or white. They had, where are you from? I'm an American. Over there, I was an American. Everywhere I went, I was an American. I did not become black until I returned to the United States.
Very interesting.
Yes. And over there, they also, when you get a job over there, if you are an Auslander, that's German for foreigner, they made sure that the people, the men in that town that had the same skill set as you, they were all employed and they didn't want that job before you got it. You know, I found that interesting also. But also over there, when I was, back in the 80s, going to the discos and clubs over there, I seen the discrimination. And it wasn't me. I show my passport, they pat me on the back and say going in. There'd be a guy from Lithuania or Poland or Czechoslovakia. They see his passport and tell him he couldn't come in. And that's when
Interesting.
they didn't let him in. And then I had a couple of friends in line behind me and they showed their passport, they could come in too. And I said, I'll be damned. I said, it's not just the color. It could be the creed. It could be where you're from,
The
you know,
culture. Yeah.
the culture. Right. So I said, so at that point in the 80s, I decided, I said, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about this because it's always going to, if you stay tied up on racism, stay stuck on color, then you're going to be unhappy for the rest of your life.
I think it was Morgan Freeman is quoted as saying that as soon as we get rid of terms like black and white, the better off everyone's going to be.
Yeah, he did say that. Right. I remember that.
You know, and just a little observation for me, my skin is lighter than yours, but
Mm,
technically I'm not white.
mm-mm.
My teeth aren't even, they're pretty clean, but they're
Yeah.
technically not white. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
my eyeballs are white.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a reverse, you're very dark brown.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard the term coffee brown or coffee black being used,
Right.
but it's not really black.
No, it's
So
not. We see black boots are, but my military boots were black. So when I put my boot up next to my skin, I say, I'm not even close to that, you know? But it's a term that was created to steal our identity and give us low self-esteem. And basically, it all ties back into stealing the land. My ancestors, I use ancestry and I go back in our historic books and our land records and stuff. I could see that my great grandmother was labeled as Indian. And then you check the census, right? And then you look 10 years or 8 years later, then she's colored. My people are colored. Then you go 5 or 7 years after that, then you see NEG, and that doesn't mean negative, it means Negro, you know? And then you go to the census, you go further down the road, then you see they're black, you know? And then now my kids, I checked their birth certificates, they're African Americans,
okay.
you know? And that was all designed that if you ever come back and try to reclaim your land, there's no treaties with African American, black on it. The treaties on the census that you're looking for is Negro, colored, or Indian. Those are indigenous people from America. So in our history, that was designed to mislabel us to take us off the land.
So
Because
again,
you can't come back with no treaty in your hand that shows that you have African American or black on there. That was something created after the fact, after they
so
took the land.
so the fundamental basis of all this is contracts, treaties being a
Yes,
form of a contract. So
absolutely.
if you cannot identify an original signatory of a contract,
Right.
then there's no claim to that contract.
That's right.
Very simple
Absolutely.
and dastardly ingenious.
Absolutely.
You gotta respect the enemy if you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna defeat him at some point, right? You got to learn what
Right.
they do,
Mm-hmm.
understand it, and so you could counteract that. Okay, so here we are
Here, let me
today,
say
Furg.
let me say one more thing too
Sure,
before I
sure.
lose my train of thought. Back to Europe. So over in Europe, you're not white. You have your nationality over there. You're Swiss, you're German, you're Italian. And even before they came over here, they had a lot of fightings and wars over there. And when I was living over there, there's a hierarchy there. The Polish, the Czechs, the Eastern Baltic state people that come to Germany or to Italy or to Spain or to England, those would be treated as the Mexicans and the blacks of Europe. You see what I'm saying? So they're mistreated. They're used as farm labor, helpers. They don't have no good education or nothing. They're seen as lowlifes over there. But if you can get yourself a ticket to come to the America, and as soon as you come to Ellis Island or you get your passport stamp, you fill out your application, guess what? You're not a lowly Yugoslavian no more. You're a white. And whites, when they come here, come to stand on the shoulders of blacks and Mexicans. You're somebody. Over there in Europe,
Indians.
you're a nobody. But when you come here, you're somebody, you get free land, and you become somebody. So that's why that black and white term was invented. Okay, and now it's your turn.
Okay, fascinating stuff. It's all programming, right? It's programming
Yes.
by the elites to keep us regular folk, no matter what color our skin or what culture we are, to keep us
Mhm.
separated and seeming like we're like maybe you have your community, I have my community, and we don't go down that street because that's the black street. They don't come over here, we're the white street, and
Right.
then there's trouble if we do. And as long as we stay separated, there's peace.
There you go.
But in reality, okay, so today we have the situation. I think the media fuels this whole racism thing. How do we get around that as a people? I know the Rastas. I know we met recently at the Harambe Reggae Festival in Oroville, California, which talks about one love. It's a whole culture that talks about one love.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get people on board with that concept? Is that the answer first? I guess I should ask first.
No, that is one love is the answer. But one love, in order to have one love, love has to exist between the communities. When you have, like in Chicago, when you just finished talking about the neighborhoods, you still got neighborhoods that you can't, if you're black, you can't go into, at night. Otherwise, the police will beat you down, or the people will run you out, and that's in most major cities. Now, since I've been here in California since 2008, I've seen areas over here that's not as bad. You can go into any area here in northern or southern California, and you could get a house and you can live there and everything. And everybody knows California is a chill state. So something like the one love concept could work in California, but there's a lot of areas in America that it's just the racism is so set in that there will never be no one love. I just think that it'll have to be bred out with the children. I'm noticing that the children and younger generation like hanging with each other, even though their parents teach them not to hang with each other. They got these integrated schools and stuff and everything, and they go to college together and stuff and everything. And the younger generation, I have hope that they'll try to get this one love promoted. But each one of us as ambassadors of one love, we keep preaching it, doing it, and doing what we're doing today and talking about it. That helps also.
When I was a little boy, I think I was about 8 years old, I was playing under 10 soccer in the Bay Area, South Bay Area. And I'd seen black people on TV, like ABC's Wide World of Sports or something. Mm-hmm. But then we came up against this team in South San Jose, and there was a skinny black kid on there. And mm-hmm. I remember saying, "Mom, who is that?" And she just told me at that young age, she said, "Don't worry about what he looks like. He's just like everybody else. You just mm-hmm. go out and you play your game."
Right.
And so I remember during that game colliding with this guy, right? Mm-hmm. And he sweat like I did. Mm-hmm. He felt when our bodies collided, it felt like colliding with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I knew from that day forward that there was no difference between white and black people. Mm-hmm. And I think we agreed those aren't even accurate terms. Mm-hmm. But to this day, my brother Ray Smith Jr. is still one of my best buddies. We're going back to high school. We were on the same high school soccer team. Mm-hmm. We won the championships, Leland High School in 1986. Mm-hmm. I was friends with his whole family. I used to go over there and hang out. Mm-hmm. And I think, so soccer is one of those kind of games that bridges or crosses over the borders.
Yep.
And maybe seen as part of that whole one love thing, right? You're just playing mm-hmm. sports. And you love people, right? You compete, and that's all good. And after the game's mm-hmm. over, you go break bread or you have a drink, whatever it is.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so we're down to our last minute, Furg.
Okay.
Gonna have to have you on again at some point. I think a future topic would be, how do indigenous traditions relate to the hollow earth or to the inner earth? Right. I think that's something that we didn't really have time to touch on now. Mm-hmm. And you went in a direction I didn't think you were going to go, and you did that, but you're blowing my mind as usual.
Right.
So before we go, please tell the people how to get a hold of you, and how they can find out more information about the kind of subjects of which you're averse.
Well, I have an Olmec website. I just remembered. It's